Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. Week 17 is in the books, and it's not the end of the season. Week 18 still to come, but playoff lives have been sorted out a little bit more, little bit clearer picture here. Finally, starting to get away with the dead wood here. Playoff seeding, not so much sorted, but at least pretty much know what teams we have here in the playoffs. Are you ready to recap Week 17?
Yeah, I'm ready to recap the final week. Oh, wait, no, it's not the final week. We still got one more.
Yeah, I know. Prepare yourself. In a couple of years, we're going to have two more. So, I thought we had a great read, really, on this week. We talked about a lot of the games on our Sunday show that was live, and I thought we read them pretty much right, but still some interesting results and how they got there mixed in there for sure.
Yeah, definitely, I would say so.
All right, let's kick it off and rip this Band-Aid off right off the start. The Rams played the Ravens, and I think this is one of the ones where you specifically said didn't know quite what you were going to get out of the Rams here going on the road in the Ravens. And we talked about if Matthew Stafford, who's had his turnover issues, gives the Ravens a little bit of a boost here, this could be a much tougher game, and that's exactly what happened. He gave them a little window to get into this game, and the Ravens stuck around here, and they didn't quite pull it out, but Rams got it 2019, take control of the division here. It's not been pretty, but the defense once again looked pretty solid. What do you make of this win here, 2019? It probably knocks the Ravens pretty much out of the playoffs. A lot of things have to break right for them to get into the playoffs next week.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the model pretty much for this whole upcoming week is, things have to go right for so many different teams, and the Ravens were one of them. They came out and they performed pretty well, all things considered with the injuries they've been dealing with. But I mentioned it on the show, on our live show last Sunday, how the Ravens have that type of offense that can really cause issues for the Rams. They're a really physical offense, and they tend to really get in your face. And that's kind of what we've seen the Rams have issues with so far this season. We saw it with the 49ers, amongst other teams as well. And going into halftime, to be completely honest with you, I really thought that this was the Ravens' game to lose. And I didn't give the Rams much of a chance simply because when you look at the record, as far as them leading in the half or being behind in the first half, it's not good. So, I was hopeful, but I wasn't optimistic. And, they managed to turn it around and pull off the win, besides Stafford obviously having a really poor game. The defense really came together and pulled off the win. So it was a really, really important game for them. And as you mentioned, they take a hold of that division with this last week being the most important one.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Rams here because the Ravens, just really the last month, the injuries finally just caught up with them. They've basically been throwing, second tier and practice squad guys out there for about the last month here. So Rams, your 2020 outlook here going into the playoffs here. I know you have to be confident that the run game continues to look pretty solid here. This was probably Sony's worst game in a couple weeks, but still looked decent enough. The defense starting to come around looking decent enough, but we talked about it over text on Sunday that it's going to be hard to trust this team to win 3 playoff games when your quarterback gives the team the ball, 2 to 3 times extra a game. You might get away with it once, like you did here. You might get away with it maybe even twice, but it just seems hard to be able to win 3 playoff games when your quarterback is, just turning the ball over the way he is. It's not even forced turnovers. That pick 6 was just a sloppy pass in the middle of the field that I think everybody on the Ravens defense knew was coming, and he still threw it there. So I'm curious your outlook here with the Rams going into the playoffs. They have won like 5 straight, but the turnovers seem to still persist here.
Listen, I'm going to try to be the optimist this time around, and I'm going to say that over the last 3 weeks or so, Matthew Stafford has looked horrible, and it was one of my biggest concerns coming into the season. During our actual preseason show, I talked about how he hasn't been to the playoffs enough times for me to feel confident in his ability to handle the big game or the big moment. And it's kind of reared his head over the last couple of weeks. As you mentioned, he's had multiple games now with pick sixes thrown, and not just that, but multiple picks in a game. And somehow the Rams have managed to pull off a game. So that's what I'm going to use as my fuel, as my motivation to keep me optimistic here. That Matthew Stafford has had really poor games, and yet he's somehow managed to pull off wins. And big part of it is with the running game. The running game's actually really good. It just seems that Sean McVay has really kind of stayed away from focusing on just a running attack, and he's put the ball in Matthew Stafford's hands a little too much, in my opinion. But like I said, I'm gonna remain optimistic and kind of look at the glass half full here. Yes, he's had 3 horrible games, but those are 3 wins, so that's ultimately what matters.
Yeah, I did hear a funny stat though the other day. Matthew Stafford has 4 pick sixes on the season. Aaron Rodgers has 3 career pick sixes. That just it doesn't mean anything really. It's just sort of funny to think about it. He has 4 this season, and Aaron Rodgers, who more than likely the Rams will come up against in this playoffs, has 3 for this whole entire career. So it's just funny.
I heard a similar stat, but it was involving Jared Goff, not Aaron Rodgers, and it was something about I believe it was like Jared Goff in his career with Sean McVay threw 3 pick sixes his entire tenure there, and obviously, Matthew Stafford has 4 over the last 3 weeks. So, it's not pretty. But like I said, ultimately what matters is that W. They managed to pull it off, and now we got a huge game coming up this upcoming week against the 49ers.
Yeah, definitely. So, the thing I'm looking at now is if maybe Stafford can just, maybe have a little bit – I'm looking at him a little bit like that Ravens team that won the Super Bowl maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. Really, really good defense. Not to the level that the Ravens team in the early 2000s type defense, but probably the best defense in the league, which I think this Rams defense is hovering. And basically, if you look at it, Joe Flacco, Matthew Stafford, at that point in time, not really all that much difference, playing style. And he caught fire in those playoffs for about a 4-game stretch. He was hitting balls. And I think that sort of is what's going to have to happen. Now, hopefully you won't pay him, a 6-year contract.
$100 million.
Yes, for winning you a Super Bowl. Granted, he's already gotten like 2 of those, but I think that's what I'm looking at. It has to be, a 3-4 game stretch where he just, catches fire, finds his rhythm, and then this team can move on. The other funny thing, they flashed it up at the end of the game. This was, the 42nd Matthew Stafford, 4th quarter comeback. And I was like, well, yeah, but how many of those is he responsible for getting them behind? So does it really count if you have a 4th quarter comeback, if you're the reason? Basically, you were behind because his turnovers cost them 13 points in that game. The Ravens had 19 in the game. So 6 points came outside of the turnover. So that's really what I'm looking at there to see if they can make a run because, we'll get to the Bucs. But certainly you can't look at the Bucs right now and be looking at them going into the playoffs at full strength and as a favorite. You look at that Cowboys-Arizona game, you certainly don't look at those 2 teams going into the playoffs as a favorite. We don't even know if San Francisco is even going to make the playoffs at this point. So, basically, the Rams are the second favorite just by default here, and it should be really interesting to see how they come and play next week versus San Francisco. Are you wanting them to seal that division up? And or are you looking at it like rest our guys? It doesn't matter. We're in the playoffs here.
I don't think that the Rams are in a position to really consider resting anybody. I think they're in a situation right now where they have to get hot and they have to clean up all the mistakes because even though that defense has looked a lot better over the last 5-6 weeks, they're still making mistakes here and there. But I will say it was nice to see Von Miller finally contribute on some big plays that actually impacted the game.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, we'll move on to our next game here. Falcons went to the Bills. Snowstorm in Buffalo, as you can expect. And Buffalo, it wasn't pretty. Josh Allen, tough game, but they found a running game here versus the Falcons. They pulled it out a little bit late. I wouldn't go nice win by the Bills, but they did keep it going there. I think I got to reiterate my point. I brought this up to you last year during the season that this Bills team is interesting here because, they play a football style that's conducive to a dome team, a warm weather team. And once again, I think they've been in Buffalo twice in the last couple weeks, both with bad weather. You assume bad weather will continue to be there in Buffalo. It seems to harm their offense, especially with the way Josh Allen looked today. They just can't get the passing game going when there's, a blizzard outside with high winds. And they seem to struggle. Now, granted, they were able to find the running game here, but my guess is most of the teams that enter the playoffs are not going to be the Atlanta Falcons defensive unit. I don't know if you can find that running game here. So I don't know if the Bills can petition to use the Dolphins Stadium throughout the playoffs, but it seems like a little bit of a problem, certainly since they're staring at about that 2 seed here, that they're going to have to play home games, but I'm assuming the weather is going to be poor, and I don't know if that helps them or hurts them that much, because it certainly kept Atlanta in this game here.
Yeah, listen, you mentioned it. We look back at that Patriot game that the Bills had, which is, they were pretty hot at that moment, and then they faced off against the Patriots in pretty bad weather, and the Bills did not look like the Bills. Bill Belichick completely made that team look like a rookie team, facing off against an elite team, and that's kind of what we can expect going forward from the Bills. I think if you're going to go into bad weather, Josh Allen had 3 interceptions in this game. It was really about that running game. If it wasn't for them being able to find the running attack, which is one thing they've lacked pretty much all season long. They ran for over 200 yards on the ground between Singletary and Allen, and I think it was 4 touchdowns, I think, total.
Yeah.
But 3 interceptions, man, you're not going to win any playoff games throwing 3 interceptions. And I know the weather was bad. I understand all that, but as you mentioned, we're in the thick of it right now. This is this playoff season. Playoff season does not equal good weather. You know what I mean? We can expect a lot of bad weather,
not
especially
in Buffalo.
That's what I was going to say. Especially for teams in the East, you're going to have a lot of bad weather during these playoffs. So I think it's a little concerning. But listen, just like the Rams situation, ultimately they got the win. I know it was against the Falcons, but I'm sure they'll take it, and hopefully they can clean things up a little bit.
Yeah, maybe they can petition the Rams to use their stadium and bring in another team. They seem to want the rental fees for the playoffs here, but they did get the win. They got one more game, pretty easy game. I look for Buffalo to continue that. It'll be interesting to see if they use their starters, but I think they will. And when they don't totally have the division sealed up here, there can be a couple things that go on. A lot of different things have to go on, but I think they will at least use their starters for a half here for sure. Atlanta, finally, we can move on past them here. I guess it's been a okay season for them. I think they've probably won about 5 more games than I thought they would all season long, but nonetheless, move on from Atlanta, and we can probably move on past this game, but I think we have to at least discuss Joe Judge and the psychoness that came from his comments post-game. But the Bears 29, Giants 3. This game was basically the most disgraceful game the Giants have played all season long, which is pretty much saying something because it seems to be getting worse from week to week. I think I say this is the most disgraceful game they've played all season long, each and every week here. The only quirky thing about the Bears is technically when Josh Field hasn't played, they're like something like 5-2 or 6-2. I don't know if that's now Nagy's going to be using that to try not to get fired, especially coming into this next week where they're going to probably win the game because I believe they play the Vikings, and the Vikings probably won't be playing anybody worth a crap. So the Bears are going to end up 7-10. Hopefully we don't have to go through another Nagy era, but anything about this game before we get into Joe Judge and his psycho comments after the game?
No, listen, I just want to say that I think it's a really disappointing season for the Giants and their fan base. I think a lot of people, mainly me, were really high on them coming into the season, thought that they had a lot of possibilities to really make some noise in that division, especially as how weak it was the previous season. But they just could not get it together. They were dealing with injuries. They couldn't, there was just no continuity whatsoever. And obviously, I mentioned it pretty much every single week. I think continuity is probably the most important part of any NFL franchise. And they just have not had that this season. Just kind of looking over the stats, they didn't even throw for 50 yards.
You threw for more yards than the New York Giants this week, which is disturbing in its own right.
I mean, sorry, I'm just have to look. Yeah, Mike Glennon threw 24 yards and 2 interceptions. That's an entire NFL football game. This is a professional football player. Yes, granted, he's not a starter, but this is a professional football player. I could throw for more yards than that. It's just – it's crazy. It's been a really bad season for them, and I'm sure a lot of people are probably glad that it's just about over. But yeah, I want to hear what you have to say about the Judge comments because I honestly haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah. Well, basically, he says they're a tight ship organization. Everybody is wanting to be here, including players who have left, who have called and said they want to come back and be there. One, that's tampering, so that's illegal. Way to tell on yourself there, if in case anyone is calling and wanting to come back into this New York Giants team.
Ooh, Plaxico Burress?
Yeah, Plaxico Burress. Well, that's what I was going to say. I don't know if they want to be on the Giants team. They just might want their high-rise apartment in Soho that they enjoy so much. Basically... giving a thumbs up to how this organization has played and how they're building on things and how it's going in the right direction. I don't know how this is going in the right direction because, like you mentioned, they basically have zero offense. Legit. Like zero offense. Not like they had 300 yards and a couple turnovers. They basically had 0 yards of offense in a professional football game. And it wasn't like they played the Packers here. We're talking about the Chicago Bears. No one is going to mistake this team for a dynasty coming off. And they've already said they're going to bring him back. But I don't know how you bring him back and be like, yeah, we're on the right foot. Next season, we're going to kick off. Because it's not even like they're a team that has salary cap space. If you look at their salary cap space, they have, a couple $100,000 in salary cap space. This is an expensive team. It's one of the most expensive teams in the league. It's not a Jaguars where you look at it and go like, okay, they could buy basically a whole nother team. This team's pretty much capped out. So what they are is what they are. And I don't foresee it improving. Maybe you get Daniel Jones back. Maybe you win a couple games. But this thing is just a mess. And we'll talk about the Jets later. But at least when we watch the Jets, we're seeing strides. It's not great, but you're seeing improvement. This has basically been a flat line to not even a flat line. It's gone down year to year. And I just don't see how you can bring him back. I think this is just total wash. and you maybe start anew. I could talk myself into bringing Daniel Jones back a little bit. I wouldn't extend him off that 4th year, certainly since he hasn't even proven he could stay healthy for a full season. I can talk myself into bringing Daniel Jones back, but I don't see how you can bring Joe Judge back. But they've already said they would. The Mara family is a loyal family, so I don't know. Just this is ugly right here in the Giantsville.
Yeah, listen, like I said, to kick off this segment, I really had high hopes for this team. I thought they were going to make a lot of noise. Just listen, on paper, I like the way they were kind of building this team up, this franchise up. But looking at what they put on the field, and I know they've dealt with injuries. I'm not going to hold that against them. But at some point, you can't keep using that as an excuse. That can't be, your crutch that you rely on all the time is, oh, we were injured, because so many other teams get hurt and they still win games. Honestly, when I'm looking at the record, I have no clue how they won 4 games this year.
Yeah, I agree. It's stunning. And then I go back and look, and one of them was that 9-6 Eagles game that
Eagles win, yeah.
Yeah, that we both lost money on. But
of course, that's how you get them to win. We got to keep betting against the Giants. That's how we're going to get them to win games.
But the other thing, even if you move on from Joe Judge and Daniel Jones, we talked about it last week. Why would somebody like Russell Wilson, who's been rumored, want to even go into this situation? How is that helping him? How is this situation better than what he has in Seattle? At least in Seattle, I can go, I have DK Metcalf. I have Tyler Lockett. I have, a running back. I don't see who of the big name quarterbacks would be point to that situation and be like, oh, that's a good situation. We can win right off the bat. They aren't. So I don't even think that's where you can put something on.
Well, I heard a rumor that there's already an agreement in place since, they like to do collusion and all that and tampering. They've already got an agreement with Aaron Rodgers. He's coming to play New York next season. So be ready for that.
Yeah.
I'm obviously joking.
Yeah, I believe Aaron Rodgers is going to leave this situation where they're the Super Bowl favorite so he can go deal with whatever the Giants are. It's just that thing's such a mess. We'll probably have to dive into it numerous times in the offseason, certainly during the draft. You can already make your draft list on what they need, everything.
Everything.
So we'll move on past that game. Last question. Matt Nagy's not going to make it back, is he? Even if he ends up winning these last 4 games for the Bears, I don't think I can do another season.
See, that's the part that scares me about it is I think that this team is not horrible. We've seen flashes of them actually play good football.
Legit, I think they'd be in the playoff mix if Dalton had stayed.
I agree with you.
And which is disturbing in its own right.
And I was one of those people that, all I kept hearing about in the media was, oh, we got to put Fields in there. We got to put Fields in. And I came out and I said it. I was really outspoken about it, how I thought that their best chance of winning was to keep Dalton as a starting quarterback. They obviously started Fields a couple of games and they lost those games pretty badly too. But listen, this team, yes, they're bad, but we've seen flashes of them not being so bad. And I've got a weird feeling that if he somehow manages to win this last game, they'll bring him back one more year. And it's not something I want to see, and it's not something I'd recommend. But I don't know why I'm getting this feeling like he's going to do just enough to keep his job.
Yeah, it crept in my head, when they won that game, and then it's like, oh, we finished on a 4-game winning streak. You see, if it hadn't have been for that little midsection when we were hurt, we would have been great. And I'm just like, oh, this guy has a billion lives. He should be starring in the Broadway play Cats. All right, we'll move on to probably the best game of the week. Bengals, Chiefs, 34-31. A really entertaining game here. Chiefs jumped out in front. Bengals worked their way back into it. And then that crazy stretch to end the game. Your boy Zach Taylor deciding to go for it 35 times and unsuccessfully getting it each time. Granted, getting bailed out and finally kicking the field goal to win it. We'll get into that, but I was really interested in this game. The Bengals stepped up. They looked like they could at least play with the Chiefs. Chiefs really weird second half where they just seemed to turn it off a little bit, and then some weird defensive decisions. Certainly that 3rd and 27 when they went zero blitz and just left Jamar Chase single covered out there after he had already had probably 11 catches for 188 yards. Didn't quite understand that. I'd be very interested what the rematch would look like in the playoffs here. I think I'd still lean Chiefs here, but the Bengals at least showed they belong and they can play with these top-tier teams here. So a good win there. What'd you make of this game?
Listen, I had a feeling coming to this game that it was going to be a really tight game. As a matter of fact, I took the Bengals as underdogs in this matchup, and it kind of played out the way I thought it would. That second half wasn't exactly what I expected it to be. I think that, as you mentioned it, I think the Chiefs really kind of took their foot off the pedal. And it came back and it bit him in the behind because we saw the huge game that Jamar Chase ended up having. And I think, listen, I think overall, I think this Bengals team is a pretty good team, and I think that they can contend with just about anybody. But, I'm on the same boat as you. Even though I took them this week, if these teams made the playoffs again, I'd probably have to lean more towards the Chiefs. Just because I saw a lot of things that could have gone the other way. And don't even get me started on that fourth quarter field goal to win the game, because my wife had a pretty sizable bet on, prop bets on, I think she needed 4 more yards from Patrick Mahomes. And I told her, I said, listen, the Bengals are about to kick a field goal or they're going to score. I said, so Mahomes is going to get the ball back, with like a 2-minute drill. So I'm like, he's going to get you your yards. Don't worry about it. How did they drain all the time off the clock? That was one of the craziest endings that I've ever seen. And not crazy in the sense where I'm like, what just happened? But crazy in the sense like, is this really happening right now?
Yes.
It completely blew me out of the water. But listen, good win for them. They locked up their division. Champions now. And now they locked themselves a playoff spot. So they got something to look forward to. Obviously, this team is definitely trending in the right direction based off the results of last season.
Yeah, and, I do think they got – I don't like to blame it on the officials, and I'm about to go off on the Cowboys for complaining about the officiating in their game versus Arizona. But I did think a handful of calls certainly benefited the Bengals in this one. Not that decided the game. The Chiefs not scoring a touchdown in the second half decided the game. But it just sort of, I thought a couple pass interferences there certainly helped out the Bengals' sustained drives there and, gave the Bengals a little bit of an edge. But yeah, that last 3 minutes on the goal line, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it because I don't think you could recreate that where the Chiefs never even get the ball after getting, 3 or 4 fourth down stops. And then the Bengals still wanting to go for it. And then, Burrow getting hurt on that, last one. It seems like he'll be okay. They did both test positive. Mixon and him both tested positive for COVID, so they'll be out this week. But they had already sealed up their thing, so I'm pretty sure those guys were all going to sit this week versus Cleveland anyway. But just sort of benefited them though. I don't know. Maybe the second time I didn't handle that 4th and 1. I might have just kicked the field goal and won the game that way because all I could see was them not getting it and then the Chiefs going down and getting a cheap field goal off of that. But yeah, good win there. I will say I'm curious about this. I like this Bengals team and everybody's looking to the future, but Burrow, my God, he takes a lot of hits. We were talking about, like 80s and early 90s quarterbacks. And this looks like a 80s, early 90s quarterback style where he just sits in there and gets blown up all the time. I don't know how long this can last. But
listen, not to compare him to Joe Montana, but that's kind of what it reminds me of just watching him on the field. He stands in the pocket. He takes big hits. it's wild to me that you'd put your quarterback in a position like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's working. So I can't be like, no, don't do that. But, I'm not sure he's going to have the longevity of Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady here. I think we're looking at because he's not, even like the size of like a Ben Roethlisberger or anything, where he's just a huge man who can absorb, contact, and he's bigger than half the people that are hitting him. It'll just be interesting to see how long he can hold up and, how many years it's, he takes one bad hit and then is out for the year. You already saw that during his rookie year. But yeah, should be interesting to see how this Bengals team goes in the playoffs. Was a little disturbed by the cigar party because they won the AFC North. That seemed a little premature, but they're all young. They're having fun. So I don't worry about it too much.
Hey, we've seen it several times where, this is an accomplishment. And so I can understand it. Listen, they've had their struggles. The franchise as a whole and the fan base have had their struggles for quite some time now. I believe the last time they were in the playoffs was when they had AJ Green and Andy Dalton.
Yeah.
And even then they didn't make much noise in the playoffs. So
they haven't won a playoff game since 1991.
So listen, I'm sure it's really exciting for them. A bunch of young guys, Joe Burrow coming off that nasty injury last season that completely put him out for the whole year. And listen, just look at his numbers. I know that he was the beneficiary of a lot of sketchy calls, let's call it. But the guy missed 9 passes, total, and he threw for over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. You put that compared to the New York Giants that we were just talking about, and how they threw for 25 yards. I mean, the contrast is it's ridiculous. So this team's definitely on the upward trend, and I'm sure they're all excited about it. But guys, don't celebrate yet. You got playoffs to worry about. Let's worry about getting a playoff win first.
Yeah, the cigar party will look pretty bad if they lose in the first round of the playoffs, like every other Bengals team has done for the last 30 years. Next game, I have to admit, I have become a diehard fan, and I have a very big rooting interest this weekend because I just want this team to make the playoffs. But the Raiders went into Indianapolis and won 23-20. I honestly don't know how they won this game because they didn't look all that good. Carr was solid, 24-31, but he, threw 2 picks, 1 touchdown. Granted, Jonathan Taylor did what Jonathan Taylor does, but Colts didn't pull this one out. Give themselves a little bit of a have to work for it in week 18 when they could have sealed everything up. Granted, nicely the calendar falls to the Jacksonville Jaguars coming in to win your game, so that always helps. But, the Raiders have got themselves win and you're in type game, which honestly is just ridiculously amazing for what this team has gone to and what they're throwing out there. Their best receiver is, Hunter Renfrow. They haven't had Waller for about 6 weeks. Now they say maybe he can make it back next week. But honestly, I've just become a fan of this plucky little Raiders team who I think everybody wrote off about week 4, and they're sitting there 9-7 with a win and you're in type game. So what'd you make of this one, Raiders Colts?
Listen, not to say that this wasn't an impressive win for a Raider team who's dealt with so much adversity this season, but I did kind of call this one. And my reason for calling this game the way it kind of went out was Carson Wentz. We didn't know what the circumstances were, with this COVID test when he tested positive. We didn't know if he was experiencing symptoms, flu-like symptoms or anything like that that would have really kind of put a damper on his ability to not just practice and kind of, get game ready, but also how he was feeling on game day. We don't know what happened. So I kind of expected this game to go, kind of the way it did. What I didn't expect was for Derek Carr to throw 2 interceptions and somehow still win this game. So kudos to the Raiders and their organization. They've overcome a lot of adversity this season. And as you mentioned, they're now, they hold their playoff chances in their own hands. Their destiny is within their own grasp. So they have some work to do, obviously. But shout out to Dynamite here, who's calling a tie this Sunday. I can't remember the way the text went, but Some pretty crazy scenario that he's got playing out here.
He has the Jaguars beating Indianapolis because the Colts haven't won there since 2014. I don't know why either of these 2014 teams factor in, because I don't think.
Why does he even know that?
I don't think either of these teams have any of the players from 2014 on their rosters. And then he has a tie for those the
Raiders and
aforementioned
Chargers?
Raiders and Chargers game. So I find that highly unlikely, but
He's put the mortgage on it.
Yes.
You better talk him out of it.
I will say just disappointing for the Colts, and this is you sort of see what can go wrong for them, certainly in the playoffs, because you put the ball in Carson Wentz's hands, and there's no telling what you're going to get. Sometimes it's really, really impressive, like last week when he made that ridiculous touchdown throw, and sometimes he's wheeling around and throwing it left-handed to the other team. That's costing his team the game. So it's going to be hard to really trust them in the playoffs, though. I think they're one of the better teams in the AFC.
They definitely have one of the better defenses in the AFC, so they have that going for them, and they have probably one of the most potent rush attacks. Although if you were to ask Dynamite, Derrick Henry's coming back, and that's going to change.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous that they don't want him playing on turf just yet. So he's all right coming back. But they're a little nervous of how the foot will hold up on turf. They want him on plain grass.
I wish I could show you this thread he sent me as soon as I got home from the movies today. It's just a whole thread with different videos on why Derrick Henry's coming back and stronger than ever.
Yes, stronger than ever. All right. We'll move on to the next game. I don't think we'll spend too much time on this one. Patriots 50, Jaguars 10. Trevor Lawrence threw a touchdown pass.
Wow, really?
Yes. That's about the only good I deem from this. Patriots get the win, pretty much clinch a playoff spot, can still sort of, if a lot of bad things happen, win their way into the division. But I don't know. Give me something on this game other than Jaguars' bad football team.
Well, that I think everybody kind of already knew. The whole Urban Meyer situation was obviously a failed project, which came back and really hurt this team and their progression. One thing I will say is the Patriots. I think they're probably one of the biggest surprises of the season. Really young team after all the departures that they had, and people who opted out and all that. We really kind of presumed that this team was basically done, and they were just going to be another pushover in the AFC East. But Bill Belichick did a great job of getting his guys ready. They put together a really good defense, and now they're in the playoffs. So I got to say, it's one of the most impressive stories of the season.
Yeah, definitely so. I'll be more interested to see what they do versus Miami next week than what they're doing versus the Jaguars this week. Next game, little more to talk about here. Buccaneers 28, Jets 24. Weird little coaching decisions not to go up 7 and kick a field goal and go for it on 4th and 1. Hand the ball to Brady. He goes down, scores a touchdown. You got the Antonio Brown situation. Honestly, I don't really care. We all know Antonio Brown is a little nutty. That continued on.
A little?
A lot nutty. That being said, they still haven't cut him yet. So I'm wondering, we give a week of breathing room and then all of a sudden we need to win playoff games. He might work his way back into that lineup. But, overall, I thought the Jets continued to look a little bit improved each and every week and are closing out the season pretty well. But I want to flip this to the Bucs, who are not closing out the season really well. If Brown doesn't come back, which I assume, they're basically down to Mike Evans and a pretty banged up looking Gronk. The defense continues to not look anything like it did last year. I'd be very, very surprised if this Buccaneers has a playoff run in them. They look a little worse for wear entering into the playoffs. It's pretty much like the complete opposite of what we saw last year.
Yeah, listen, Cyril Grayson and Tyler Johnson really stepped their game up after that whole situation with Antonio Brown walking out. But I don't think that's something you can depend on, especially when you talk about the playoffs. These are guys that have very limited experience, and not just that, have very limited time on the field because of all the great weapons this team has had pretty much all season long. They obviously don't have Goodwin, who went out to IR, and with this Brown situation, I think it really puts a damper on things because you look at the way they ended last season. They weren't the best team by any means, as the season ended last year, but they were probably the hottest team.
Yeah.
And they rode that heat all the way to the Super Bowl, ended up winning the Super Bowl. And I don't know if they can do it with all the injuries that they're dealing with. It just seems like it's too tall of an order for them to fill. I think that they're going to have to find a way to make something work with Brown for the remainder of the postseason because they need him. I wouldn't depend on these guys, Grayson and John. They had good games, but I wouldn't depend on these guys to be, your go-to guys, especially in big situations. So I think that if I'm a Bucs fan, I'm a little worried that we're not ending this season the way we ended last season. But I know there was a couple of people that kind of saw this game playing out the way it did.
Yeah.
That was you and me.
Yeah, it sort of played out, and honestly, if Salt Lake kicked the field goal, I think the Jets might have won it. Why? I don't know. Analytics.
I was this close to taking Jets money line. I ended up taking the spread.
Oh, that would have been fun as you watch them try to go for it on 4th and 1. And get stuffed and hand the ball right back to Brady as he trots down. But, analytics got insane. This Jets team, I will say, looks pretty solid, and I'm interested next year. They got a handful of draft picks, that they have coming into the draft. I think they could start to build a team here. I'm not 100% sold on Saleh quite yet. 4 decisions like, yesterday when you can go up 7, kick the ball off. Then guess what? When Brady drives down and scores a touchdown, you're tied. You're going to overtime instead of just handing it and losing. So, I'm interested on this Jets team next year. But I don't. How stunned would you be if the Bucs lost in the first round of the playoffs? I don't think I'd be that stunned. I think it's sort of snowballing that sort of way. Now, that being said, if it's the Saints or something who work their way in the playoffs, I'd be a little bit more stunned.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those situations. Like I said, last year they were really hot coming into the playoffs, and I think most people kind of expected them to at least advance after that first round, but I don't think many people really gave much of a shot. But as they just continued to stay hot, we saw what they did. They rode it all the way to the Super Bowl. They're not doing the same this year. So how shocked would I be if they were 1-out? Not very shocked. And it'd be understandable too. They've dealt with a lot of injuries and they've had guys in and out of the roster. They've picked guys up off the street and it's been a tough year for them. They've managed to pull off a lot of wins because they have such a good nucleus of players around them, but it's hard to maintain for an entire season and postseason after that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next game up, Dolphins, Titans. Titans won this pretty easy and controlled this game pretty easy. I think we both sort of saw the Dolphins offense finally sort of crumble because it'd been sort of living in smoke and mirror territory. They just couldn't hold up to that front line of the Titans. And that's sort of how this played out. What'd you make of this game? I think it was sort of what we both expected here, but Dolphins run ends here. I think there's maybe like a billion teams have to lose and they have to win sort of way to work their way in the playoffs. But overall, their season's done. But I think in our preview, we said they'd be probably around 500, maybe a 9-8 type team. They wouldn't win 10 like they did last year, but it was a good close for the Dolphins. Titans, amazingly, somehow are the 1 seed here. And I do think it'd be very important for them to get the bye.
Listen, I think that's probably one of the most shocking things of this whole situation, this whole season, is how the Titans have managed to somehow hang on to that number 1 seed. They had it for a little while. They lost it. They regained it. And this is all with their best player going out halfway through the season. Now, that's not to say that their backup hasn't done a pretty outstanding job at filling in, Derrick Henry's shoes. But they've dealt with injuries also. They've dealt with COVID. They've dealt with a bunch of different issues. So for them to be in the position that they're in now, I think is pretty impressive. Um, for the Dolphins side of the ball here, listen, I have to say, I was kind of expecting a little bit of a letdown from that offense because, in my opinion, they hadn't been all that great. They had been doing just enough. The most surprising thing was that defense, and it seems like they just completely folded against this Titan offense. And that's probably the one thing that I didn't expect. I thought the defense would show up and put up a good fight, but the entire team just really seemed to have an off day, and it was a horrible time to do so because they really needed this win if they wanted to keep their chances alive.
Yeah, definitely. So, I did read that it was like the first time since I think like 2002 that a 5-loss team will be the 1 seed. But I think that pretty much sums up the AFC this year. It's a lot of flaws pretty much on every team that we consider one that would be able to go to the Super Bowl. But it just sort of finally came up, snake eyes for the Dolphins here as they made their little run. Good win by the Titans. We'll see if they can hold on and beat the Texans next week. They had a little trouble with the Texans about 6 weeks ago, but a little bit more riding on the line in that one. But also, I wonder if they're going to play to health as well in that one. So it'll be interesting to see how they play that out as well. Next up, Eagles versus the Washington football team. Wasn't pretty by the Eagles, but they found a way to get the win here. This sort of played more into, I don't know how good this Eagles team has been. They've really benefited from a very, very soft last 6 weeks. I'm curious to you as a Rams fan who, the Eagles are sort of lining up in that spot where they play the Rams. How much do the Rams, or not the Rams, how much of the Eagles really scare you, or you think this will be a pretty much, don't want to say walk in the park, but a routine win? Because I do think the talent level between, Rams and Eagles is pretty vast here. And I think it's just, you see it when the Eagles play even a semi-healthy Washington team that they struggle to even get the win in that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to be dependent on not just the health of the rushing attack for the Eagles, but also the health of not just the health, the ability of the defensive line of the Rams to be able to hold a rushing attack, because that's one of the things they've struggled with pretty much all season long is teams that rush the ball a lot, really heavy run teams. That's what they tend to struggle with. So I wouldn't be super excited to face off against this Eagles team simply because they have so many different avenues to which they can run the ball. Listen, they've had an impressive season, by their standards, based off what they've done over the last couple of years.
Especially since we thought they'd probably win about 3 or 4 games. I will say
Exactly.
That's what's impressive now, even if the schedule sort of fell your way. 9 wins, maybe 10 wins, depending on how that, who's playing who in that Dallas game. But, 9-10 wins for this Eagles team. You have to just tip your hat and say they really played better than I think either of us thought coming into the season.
Yeah, I think that if you look at this team as a whole, just based off the results over the last couple of seasons, you have to, if you're a Philadelphia Eagle fan, you have to look at this team and be like, regardless of the final outcome, whether, we managed to sneak into the playoffs, win a playoff game, or lose one, this was a successful season. It gives you something to build on, build upon going into next season. And you kind of have the dynamic, the DNA of what your team's personality is going to be. And then you can go and acquire guys that are going to fit that scheme. So I think it was a successful year for them regardless. And we still got 1 game left to go, and there's still a lot of different outcomes and scenarios that could play out. But overall, I think this definitely was a good year for an Eagles and Eagles fans.
Yeah, definitely so. Disappointing for Washington overall, but I thought they'd be a little better, but defense never really showed up. And then I don't even know how to, sort of summarize the last half of their season. They were basically playing practice squad guys for the last 3 weeks. So really hard to get a gauge on what this team is. If you were Washington, Would you bring back Heineke here, or is it?
I think it really depends on what's available. If there's someone out there, as you mentioned, a guy like Russell Wilson, for example, who, if there's a possibility to
Also,
get a
their
guy like Russell
stadium
Wilson.
railing is falling down as people exit.
I don't know if not to go off subject here, but I don't know if you heard the story. I was reading it this morning. Jalen Hurts wrote a letter of concern, and he sent it off to the NFL and to, was it FedEx Field? Is that
Yes.
what? Where he was basically trying to figure out what the steps are that they're going to take to ensure that this kind of stuff doesn't happen again. I just think it's hilarious when an NFL player goes out of his way to write a letter, trying to figure out what they're going to do to maintain someone else's stadium.
Yeah, well, I think when you see the stadium crushing upon you, you become a little bit more nervous.
You know what it reminds me of?
6 weeks ago, sewage was leaking out of the place, and now railings are falling down.
Listen, and I think it's almost like a testament to what the franchise has been going through over the last couple of years. It seems to be in turmoil, and the stadium seems to be in turmoil as well. But it kind of reminded me of that Reggie Bush, St. Louis Rams back when they were in St. Louis at the Edwards Jones Dome, and he caught a pass, I believe, some screen or something or dump off, and he ran off to the side, and he tried stepping on the sideline, and he stepped on concrete or something. He slipped, and he tore his ACL, and he was out for the rest of the year. It's just things you don't want to see happen. You want to, if these guys are going to get hurt, you want to see it done in a competitive fashion, not in once the game's over or once the play's over, where it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, let's not kill Jalen Hurts by a stadium falling on him.
All right, please don't.
We'll move on to the next game here. Chargers Broncos. We got good Chargers this week. Good Chargers. Everybody seemed to be back. We got Drew Lock Broncos. I think that pretty much sums. If I just say Drew Lock Broncos, you can pretty much assume nobody is scoring points in Denver, and sort of a whimper to close out this Denver team. But I don't think at any point, even though they got in and around 500, they're pretty late in the season. I think we both sort of saw the sort of wool being pulled over our eyes by the Broncos team. Chargers get this win. They would have made it a lot easier if they'd gotten the win last week versus the Texans, but they're in a showdown here with Oakland, basically win and you're in type game. What do you make of the Chargers?
You're in.
Yeah. What do you make of the Chargers here? What do you make of this game?
Listen, I think it's the most impressive thing for this Chargers team is how young they are and how far they've come. You think about the Chargers back in San Diego with Phillip Rivers, and the guy was a beast. He was constantly putting up big numbers and throwing the ball all over the place. Antonio Gates and Tolbert and all those guys. And they had a really good offensive unit. And you look at this Chargers team, yes, they're lacking the defense, but offensively they've done really well. I believe that Herbert surpassed Rivers this week in passing touchdowns in a season in Chargers history. So I got to say, that's really impressive. Now, a lot of people are talking about records that are going to be broken this year because of that extra game. So I'm kind of looking at this week as the cutoff week for breaking records.
Yeah.
So Herbert was able to do it, and I think that's really impressive for a guy in his second year to just come out and really take control of that offense the way he's done. And yes, it would have been much better if they would have won last week, but they got the win this week, and now they got a really important game coming up against a divisional rival. And I think they're going to be able to do it. But obviously, a lot remains to be seen. The game still has to be played. But overall, successful season for this Charger team.
I'm telling you now, Napoleon Kaufman Oakland Raiders jersey is coming out for Friday's show.
Really?
Yes,
I want to see you wearing it.
All right, we'll move on to the next game, 49ers Texans. This one wasn't pretty. Trey Lance got the start. Didn't look great in that first half, but made that little drive to get that field goal. And then second half started to look a little bit better. I just don't know what to make of this Niners team. There are parts at times I see good, and then there are just parts at times I see bad. Basically, win versus the Rams and you're in, but I don't know if it's as easy as that for these Niners, especially since it might be Trey Lance going against those Rams here. I don't know how healthy Jimmy Garoppolo is, but that being said, the Niners have tended to own the Rams over the last, handful of years. But honestly, we didn't get into it, but I think it would probably behoove the Rams to beat this Niners team and get the Saints, who we haven't got to, into those playoffs, because Saints seems like a much better matchup than someone like the Niners, certainly to go up against.
Oh, definitely so. I would say that as a Ram fan,
we're getting to Saints Carolina as well.
Yeah, I'd much rather see them play the Saints than the Niners. But listen, Trey Lance, he ran the ball a few times in that game, not too many, but he was effective enough. I believe he averaged around about 4 yards per carry. And then they had Mitchell come back.
He doesn't seem shy to try to run over people, which I might advise to pass on.
No, listen, I want to see him try that against Aaron Donald. That's what I'd really like to see. But, Mitchell came back from injury and had a really good game running the ball. And listen, this Niner team, it's so weird because when I think about them and I think about their wins, it seems like a really impressive team. But then I also look at the rest of their losses and I'm like, how did they lose this game? How did they lose that game? And it seems like a team that's trying to, climb the mountain, and they're definitely making progress, but they're not quite at the top yet. They're not the best that they can be. And I think that there's still some growing to do here. But overall, based off all the injuries they dealt with last season, this has to be a successful season for them, regardless of the outcome. This upcoming week, obviously they would like to win the game, and I think they're going to come out and play really hard. They know that they have this Rams team's number. They've done it pretty much every single season, and they're in a really good position to punch in a playoff ticket. So I don't know. I just think it's a successful year for them. As a Ram fan, I don't want to see the Rams play them, but I do have to give credit where credit is due, and I think they've done a pretty good job at overcoming the hurdles that they had to deal with last season.
Yeah, I think this is one of the teams we haven't been able to read pretty much all season long. I think we're off like every Friday. We try to figure out what's coming out of the Niners. You either get the monster pass rush and a defensive lockdown and, just a tight offense that is explosive, or we get what we got, 2 weeks ago versus the Titans. It looks good for 20 minutes and then it just completely melts in the second half. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with versus the Rams. I'm curious, would you rather play the Niners or the Cardinals if you had a choice in that first round matchup? Because I think the Cardinals are hovering right around that spot where the Rams are. It's hard to make since, basically every spot other than the one is, a little bit, up for grabs here.
Yeah, the NFC has been really competitive this season. But listen, if I had a choice, I would honestly have to say I'd rather play the Cardinals, simply because, yes, they have a lot of superstars, and they seem like they're probably one of the most potent teams this season. Barring the last couple of weeks where they've had a bit of a drop off, but they've been definitely one of the best teams so far this year. Even with all that being said, I think that the Rams are built to go up against teams like the Cardinals, and not so much teams like the Niners, teams that are going to punch you in the mouth, unless we see that change in offensive philosophy that I've talked about before with the Rams, and they turn into a more run-heavy team. Then I feel like they could match up well against anybody. But if they're going to play the way they've been playing pretty much all season long, I'd rather face off against the Cardinals.
Yeah, definitely so. And speaking of said Cardinals Cowboys, 25-22 Cardinals. I think we could pretty much call this the fallen star game because honestly, I watched a lot of this game. We talked about it. We had this game pegged. We thought the Cardinals would be the play here. Turned out to be the play, but I watched both these teams play. I was seriously underwhelmed by both. These both are just looking bad, and we got a nice little lift off on the Cowboys last week, and Dak put up a bunch of big numbers, but it pretty much looked the same as it looked the last couple weeks before that big one versus the Washington practice squad. I don't know what's going on with them, but it's just with both these teams right now. I don't think either could make a run, and honestly, I would not be stunned if either got beat in that first round.
Yeah, listen, both of these teams have been somewhat reeling over the last couple of weeks. Now, I know that the Cardinals obviously got a big win this week, and the Cowboys got a big win the previous week. But, I think that we've both kind of been down on both of these teams over the last few weeks because we've definitely seen a decline in not just efficiency, but, I know it's not a measurable item, but heart. Like, I just don't see heart from either one of these teams. There seems to be a lot of pouting, a lot of moodiness, a lot of throwing up their hands when things don't go their way. And that's just not the mark of a championship caliber team, in my opinion. And listen, obviously things could change, but, just going based off the way they've played over, this last month, I would say that both of these teams, I would not be shocked if they both were out after the first round.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit Cowboys after the game complaining about the refs and the holding calls and, maybe complain about the biggest, most explosive play on offense was not done by your $40 million a year quarterback, but was a wide receiver pass by Cedric Wilson. Maybe find that explosiveness on offense for whatever reason. Probably because Zeke might still be a little banged up. I don't know. But they have just decided never to run the ball again. I don't quite know why that is, but you're paying a lot of money for a running back that you've decided you don't want in the offense anymore. I just don't understand this Cowboys team. The one thing I could say about the Cardinals, their defense looked much better than it had the previous couple weeks. They aren't the kind of defense that shuts you down, but they have that, big front line that can get sacks. They can throw exotic blitzes, and they make, big plays like that fumble that they got from Dak. There were a couple passes that probably should have been picked that didn't get picked. So if I was looking glass half full on the Cardinals, that defense might be able to win them a game or two in the playoffs. But offensively, I didn't see much that I thought was all that impressive on that side of the ball, and that continued. But, Cowboys maybe not complain about holding. Maybe find your offense and the quarterback you're paying $40 million to, who, if you want to go, you shouldn't go really base everything off QBR. But if you look at Dak's QBR, it's sitting in the mid-20s with a lot of quarterbacks who we've asked questions, should they be back next year? So I think that's the problem right there.
Yeah, but it's been pretty much an ongoing situation with them all season long. The reason why the Cowboys have been so successful this season is because their defense has been basically living off the turnovers.
Yeah.
We've seen their linebacker and their young cornerback have outstanding seasons for young guys, and you look at the numbers for the wide receivers, and, we expected big things from CeeDee Lamb this year. We obviously expected big things from their other wide receivers, and they just haven't really produced. Now, it hasn't been every single week. They've had good games, obviously, here and there. But I think that based off what we are accustomed to seeing from this Cowboys offense, this isn't even close to what we expected.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, next game. This one made my eyes bleed a little bit, but Saints 18, Panthers 10. Saints defense came to play. That's about all I got on this one. Matt Rule blaming the Panthers offensive line and not Sam Darnold for the poor play this week. I don't know if he's hedging his bets and might have to bring Darnold back next year, or he continues to just say things to try to get himself fired. Nothing on the Cardinals end. Good win by the Saints. Taysom Hill, not pretty, but effective. I'd go with, but I don't know what to say about these two teams. Saints are ugly, but find ways to win. Panthers are ugly and never win.
Listen, at least the Saints team, which we know offensively they were going to have their struggles. We've known that their best asset had this year has been their defense, and at least they've shown up in half the games at least. Whereas the Panthers, we expected good things from their defense. You know, they started off the season 3-0, and they're currently what 5-11.
Yes.
I mean, they've lost 11 of their last 13 games.
None of them close, really, either.
Exactly. It's just bad football, bad coaching. I think it's the entire organization needs a complete revamp. They invested a lot of money in guys that just can't stay healthy, and not just that, they've invested money and picks in guys that other teams didn't want because they just weren't working out. So I don't know where the franchise goes from here. I really like this Carolina team. I thought that they would do a lot better than they did, but obviously it wasn't meant to be. And now they're going to be sitting at home while everyone else is getting ready for the playoffs.
Yeah, I will say Marquez Callaway showed up. So nothing like going 17 weeks and doing nothing in fantasy and showing up in week 17. Scored to everybody's wide receiver sleeper.
Nice.
All right. Next game, we'll make it short and sweet. Seahawks 51, Lions 29. Basically, two teams going nowhere, playing a meaningless game. Russell put on some stats. I will say that, but I don't know. Meaningless game. Tim Boyle at quarterback. Anything on this one?
No. Yeah, disappointing season for the Seahawks. Not used to seeing the Seahawks
Same season as always
much
for the Lions.
Yes, the Lions, kind of a broken record type situation. But the Seahawks, I think, were probably the biggest disappointment in the NFC West when a lot of people anticipated all four of these teams to be vying for a playoff spot.
Yeah. Next up, Packers, Vikings 37-10. Sean Mannion started at quarterback. I don't know. Packers much better than Vikings. Steered up one seed overall. Rodgers really good. I don't see any way that you could not make him the MVP. I know some people won't vote for him, but with the Colts at barely above 500, I guess you could talk yourself maybe a little bit into Cooper Kupp, but
Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, but the Colts losing that game, how can he be an MVP and you're 9-7? That's, granted, there's probably a handicap there with Carson Wentz as your quarterback. But, overall, I think you got to just hand it to Rodgers and whatever. But anything on this game other than Packers continue to look pretty solid. Defense looked a little better this week, but, I mean, it's a heartless Vikings team with Sean Mannion at quarterback, so I don't know what to go with there.
No, you listen. You mentioned it. The most important fact of this game was the fact that the Packers clinched the number one seed in the NFC and home field advantage throughout the playoffs for the NFC side of the ball, at least. And not just that, I think Aaron Rodgers solidified his status as the MVP, or at least the incumbent MVP of the league. I think it's been cemented pretty much. And listen, this is coming from a Ram fan who thought that what Cooper Kupp did this year was completely amazing. But you just can't take it away from Aaron Rodgers. The fact that regardless of who they have available at running back or at wide receiver, or how the defense is playing, or, what the critics are saying about him, nothing phases this guy. And he's just a winner. Whether you like him or not, the guy's a winner. So he's probably going to win the MVP, and I'm not going to be upset about it.
Yeah. One question on this one. They locked it up. They probably won't play Rodgers and Adams and those guys in Week 18. That now gives them 2 weeks off. That always gives me a little bit of I don't know. It just seems like it always takes you a quarter and a half to re-find your rhythm here. I don't know if you risk playing those guys a little bit because, something happens to Rodgers, something happens to Adams. I mean, even if something happens to like Jones, you put yourself in a bad situation. So I just don't know what to do. There's not really a right or wrong answer. it always throws me when you have to sit 2 weeks. That seems to throw you off a little bit. You get off to a slow start in those playoff games. Would you sit your guys just fully in this one, or you try to give them a little bit of, run in the next game?
See, I would. I don't think that there's anything left to prove for this Packer team. I think that they've pretty much made the statement that they wanted to make, which is that they're probably the best team in the NFC, if not the NFL. But I have a feeling that coach is thinking about this, and it's probably sitting in the back of his mind. So I have a feeling that they're going to dress and they'll play maybe a quarter, maybe 2 quarters for this last game, and then they'll just sit guys. Now, hopefully no one gets injured. Obviously, that's not the way you'd want to see things play out, but I think they play him just because they know that they're going to get that bye week. So I expect them to play, even if it's for just a quarter or even a few series, just to kind of try and get them at least in rhythm here, because they will get that week off.
Yeah. The second it looks like Rodgers is going to get touched, though, I'd start to abandon ship pretty quick.
Yep. I don't care if they're at the 1 and they're getting ready to score. You pull them. As soon as someone smells them, gets close enough to sniff them, you pull Rodgers.
All right. Last game of the week, Browns, Steelers. This was Ben's last game at home. Went good for the Steelers. Also secured that Mike Tomlin continues to never have a losing record, which honestly, if Mike Vrabel hadn't have gotten that team to at least the sniff of the 1 seed out of the AFC, to get this team anywhere near 500 is basically a modern miracle. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, 24 for 46. 123 yards. Anyone who's doing math, that's 2.7 yards per attempt. That's not very good on pass plays. This is just not a great Steelers team, but they at least kept themselves in the mix, and they just know how to win games. Kudos to Ben for getting this win to end the season. Browns season just complete lost cause, and I think we'll go into the offseason asking questions about what we do with Baker Mayfield here.
Yeah, listen, first off, kudos to Harris, who had one of the best. Yeah, man, he had a really good game. In a matchup where a lot of people anticipated probably Nick Chubb to be like the leading running back. He ended up with a ton of yards, and he helped his team pull off the victory in a really important game for Big Ben. Maybe not so much for standings and things like that, because they're still in the mix, but it's another one of those situations where so many things have to go right for them. But, Big Ben made it public that this was his last game at Heinz Field, and, Harris came out and he performed. He made sure that they were going to go away with the win on his last game at home. So kudos to him. Really good season for him for a young running back. And I think at least it gives Pittsburgh Steelers fans hope that you've got a franchise running back. Now, comes the hard part, which is replacing the Pittsburgh legend, Big Ben. Whether you like him, whether you don't like him, whether you think he stayed too long, there's no denying that he's a legend in Pittsburgh, and he'll go down as one of the greatest in Pittsburgh. He had a good career, so you got to tip your hat off to him, and as he bids farewell, and maybe he sticks around a little bit longer if they can sneak in, but it seems unlikely.
You just want that so you can bet against him in that first round of the playoffs.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Him and his 2.7 yards per attempt. All right, that wraps up our week. What do you got for best of the week on the offensive side of things this week?
All right, let's see. Sorry, I had to put Rascal down here because he's really clingy today for some reason. For best of the week on offense, I am going that's my worst of the week. Sorry. Best of the week on offense. Shout out to Jonathan Taylor, who passed Edgerrin James for most rushing yards in the season in Colts history, and Cooper Kupp, who passed Isaac Bruce for most receiving yards in the season in Rams history. But the honor goes to Jamar Chase, wide receiver from the Bengals, who had a ridiculous 11 catches for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns as he helped his Bengals clinch their division.
Yeah, I don't think you can go any other way. And if you can, you probably need to think about your life decisions here. But Jamar Chase, definitely so. Now, you might want to question why the Chiefs continued to single cover him the whole game. But that being said, he made them pay when they single covered him. So, yeah, Jamar Chase. On the defensive side of things, where are you going?
For best of the week on defense, I'm going to go with somebody who didn't really get love this season. And as we get closer to the end, obviously, you want to try and be a little inclusive with certain people. So I'm going with Robert Quinn, defensive end of the Bears. It's been a journey for Quinn, who was touted as the next big thing in St. Louis when he led the league in sacks. The Bears haven't had too much to celebrate, but Quinn has been getting it done when healthy. Quinn had a fumble forced and a sack. He now has 18 sacks on the season, which is the most he's had since he recorded 19 sacks back in 2013 for the St. Louis Rams. He is currently second in the league behind just TJ Watt.
Yeah, good game for Robert Quinn. Good season for Robert Quinn. North Carolina, pride, baby. Tar Heels.
The mighty, mighty Quinn.
I'm going with Isaiah Simmons and Budda Baker of the Arizona Cardinals. Both just played lights out in that game. And really, if you want to look to a reason why the Cardinals won that game, Isaiah Simmons, Budda Baker, hell of a game they played, and Isaiah Simmons making that ridiculous forced fumble on Dak as the Cowboys drove down there to try to even that game up. So Isaiah Simmons, Budda Baker on the Arizona side of things. All right, Coach of the Week.
Best of the week for Coach. The only reason I'm giving him the nod is because I'm not sure if we will see him again until next season. But I'm going with Mike Tomlin from Pittsburgh. Coach came up with a hell of a game plan to send his quarterback off with a big win. And as you mentioned it, that win also makes sure that he won't have a losing record. Now, I talk constantly about continuity pretty much every single week. And there's no bigger sense of continuity here than Mike Tomlin with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Mike Tomlin, best of the week.
We're on the same wavelength here. For me, Mike Tomlin, to get this team at least to 500. They might even get to 9-7 if they can beat that Ravens team next week. Just an amazing job by Mike Tomlin. I know they probably won't get into the playoffs, but to get this Steelers team, which is, should be something like what Carolina is right now, and a handful of those other teams that we have basically just brushed off in our review as terrible football teams. To put this team even in that mix is just one hell of a coaching job. So Mike Tomlin for me as well this week. All right, worst of the week, where are we going?
Worst of the week on offense, I'm going with wide receiver from Tampa Bay, Antonio Brown. Last I heard, he was technically still on the team, but I'm sure it won't be for long. Brown managed to prove the critics right as he walked out on his team mid-game while they were down to the Jets. Brady and company managed to pull the comeback, no thanks to the diva of all divas, Antonio Brown, worst of the week.
Yeah, it's probably low-hanging fruit, but the Giants. And I guess we probably have to go a little bit with Mike Glennon, but I'm just going the Giants offensively because, Saquon needs a little thrown in there, and just overall, Giants offensively, certainly the worst of the week. You can't even say offensively because they literally didn't do anything on offense. Absolutely nothing. So Giants on the worst of the week for me. What do you got on the defensive side of things here?
Let's see. For worst of the week on defense, I'm going with the Dolphins. In a game that carries significance, the Dolphins defense, which has been their best unit, completely folded to a Titans offense that, although currently in first place in the AFC, has seen its struggles with injury and efficiency and gave up 34 points. The offense didn't help them as they managed to put up just 3 points.
Yeah, I'm going to a unit that had been improved, the Chiefs here. It just odd game plans. I mentioned that 3rd and 27 in our review where they went cover 0 and just left Chase out there, which basically flipped the whole game on that one, and the Chiefs probably would have run. Just interesting. Now, I don't know how much of that was just to see, what the Bengals were doing, assuming they will probably play again in the playoffs and such, but it wasn't as clean as we had seen in the past couple weeks for the Chiefs. So Chiefs, worst defense on the week for me. All right, on the coaching side of things, where are we going?
For worst of the week, I am going with Kevin Stefanski, the 2020 AP Coach of the Year. Really gave this one away. Well, kind of. The winning formula for his team has been to pound Chubb, and he got away from it early on. And they got down before trying to implement the running game again when it didn't look like it mattered. The Steelers beat the Browns in time of possession by nearly 10 minutes. You expect better from the coach of the year, regardless of his team being out of the playoffs or not. So Kevin Stefanski, worst of the week for coaching.
Yeah, Stefanski definitely in there. Probably most disappointing on the season for sure. But I'm going with Joe Judge. Not just post comments, but just game overall. It's just bad there. And oh, God, I can't even. It's disturbing how poorly.
Got you flustered.
Yeah, it's disturbing how poorly that Giants game was. Yeah, Joe Judge for me. All right, that's our show. We'll be back later in the week on Friday to discuss Week 18 of the NFL season, sort out how these playoffs are going to look, and then be sure to catch us on the playoffs. That should be a fun time as we close out this season. But yeah, Week 18, we'll get into it on Friday. Where can we find you, Achilles?
As always, you can find me on Twitter at TD Achilles, and you can find me on TikTok at That Dude Achilles.
All right, that's our show, and we're out.